from Kikatla talk about were people from England coming into the community of Kikatla, people from the royal family coming into the community of Kikatla and literally taking children with them. And when they took children with them, they left with the promise of a better future. They left with the promise of a higher education. And in many cases, our families today, still to this day, do not know the whereabouts of these children. And it was not just subject to our community in Kikatla, but this happened across the northwest coast of British Columbia. And our elders remember this. So this is a very important topic that has been ongoing and continues to be a very, very important topic in our communities. Our community of 750 people of Kitsilas is an urban community in much the same way that you are. We are an urban community and we face many of the same social and economic struggles that people live in Terrace, the people that live in Thornhill, and not only that, but the people that live in more rural communities face. And because of that, our people come to urban centers and they look and they seek freedom in the form and in a form that is not our own. So it's very important to talk about these things. I was very excited when our CAO, Linda, called and asked me if I wanted to do this. And I jumped at the opportunity and I committed to staying for the first hour. So I'm very happy to sit and share with you guys for the first hour here. And before I leave, I have these gifts, or I might have to run out to my vehicle to grab them. And I left them. So I will run out before the end here and I will grab them. But I really want to thank you guys for coming out. And what it is a pin that was made from our community. And I believe the constables already have one, but the DFO officers that Constable Tilma brought to our community. But what they are is it's a symbol of good luck. You come to Kitsilas, you come to very many First Nations communities, and we have these symbols, we have these logos. But what they symbolize and what they mean to our communities, good luck, and especially our lands and resource logo. It is the Nuganax logo. And Nuganax to our people was a bringer of good luck. It was also someone our people would go to when couples would not have children. Our people would go to the mouth of the Skeena River at Hayesport, and at Hayesport, they would provide sort of an offering to this supernatural being. And in return, he would either give good luck or to people that were looking for an abundance of family, growth, he would give them children, babies. And so it was a person that they believed would bring good luck. And to our people, good luck is also children. So when children are born, it also means good luck is coming to your families. So I really want to thank you. And I want to thank the group for coming here and taking part in such an important meeting this morning.
CJ, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here today. And that's just on behalf of the school.
Thank you so much.
So
thank you.
Enjoy this morning.
Thank you.
Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. So the washrooms, you pass them as you came in, on the left-hand side. And there is a lot of food. This is a tricky topic. So, drink lots of water, eat lots of food. There is a lot of sugar to keep you sustained. Not sure whether you go up and then crash, but that's okay. So muffins and donuts, there will be more food brought in at the break time. And so just feel free to move when you need to. Get up, move, help yourself to whatever you need. Make sure that you're comfortable. At the end of the day, this is a tricky topic. And so I recommend that you hydrate. I recommend that you drink a bowl of water today, and then you try and release some of any of that cortisol that's in your body as you go through this morning's presentations. We have Teams, and the Teams link is open. So if you can download Teams onto your device if you want, and then you can open up the QR code. Then you can put questions things you want to discuss, any items that you know of. And what I'll do at the end of the morning, I'll gather all of the questions that you have. I will collate everything. I'll share it with Nicole and Kelly, and we'll kind of go through and figure out what is the next step. So this is just a starting point. So as you have thoughts and ideas and possible things that you might want to action later, please put them into the team link or email myself, Kelly, or Nicole, who I'll introduce you to in a minute. And we need to gather this information. Yeah, just a reminder, it's a starting point. So the agenda, we have, we'll do a quick intro for the people involved, and then it'll start with the school district. So the school district's going to do a bit of presentation, and I will, I'll intro the people that are going to be talking on behalf of myself. And then the RCMP will be doing a portion. We'll have a refreshment break, and then we'll move on to Northern Health. And then we'll do a little bit by MCFD, and then I will do a wrap up and just see if we can gather our thoughts on how we want to proceed after we have received the knowledge today. So if I can have Danielle, Nicole, Lori, and Kelly pop up and just introduce yourselves. This day wouldn't happen without a team. As you know, one person cannot achieve a lot, but together we can do great things. So I'll get Nicole to introduce herself first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Hendry. I work for Northern Health under the Integrated Child and Youth team. And this is my supervisor, Danielle. She's our team lead. I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, so I have the good fortune of being the program lead for ICY. And I was approached by Kirsten, my manager, to look into getting this organized, but I just want to acknowledge that none of this would have been possible today without the very hard work of Nicole and Julia and Terry, who put it all together. So please acknowledge that they are amazing people and they've brought us here today. I think the point that we need to focus on is that all of us have been touched by exploitation of youth and sexual exploitation and human trafficking. Even if we're just walking down the street and seeing a youth who's intoxicated, we know how that happened. So that might be it, or we might be working front line and seeing it every day. So the important thing is that you are not alone. And so you're here to get emotional sustenance to continue your work, and also lots of food and drink sustenance too. Welcome.
Thanks, Lori.
My name is Lori Foster. I run the general investigation section under the Terrace RCP detachment. My team, who is also here today. So it's my team that obviously will be undertaking the majority, if not all, of the trafficking investigations that come our way. So obviously this is an opportunity. We just want you guys to kind of see us, meet us, kind of see obviously what we can do in terms of how we can investigate these, and go from there.
I am Kelly Cates. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. I'm right now I'm the community police officer in Paris, working with schools, working with community events, working with a number of different things within the detachment. The privilege of being the happy side of policing, if there is one. Not so much human trafficking, but I am right-hand man to Lori today, assisting however I can.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, ladies. I am going to be very brief. I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'm going to pass it over. I'll do the bios for the ladies that are going to be talking. So my name is Julia Nicard. I'm Director of Instruction of Inclusive Education at the school district. We encompass Gippsland, Heisler, Niska, and Sinsound territory. So that is Stewart and Kitimat and Hazleton and Terrace area. I've been in the school district now, I think it's 24 years, 5 years, education longer. I've never, ever had to do a presentation on human trafficking. Never, ever did I think I would have to do a presentation on human trafficking. I consider myself an expert in inclusive education, the champion of youth with complex needs that are neurodiverse. But I was sitting across the table from a young lady. Part of my job is I have to do what's called a level 2 suspension. So that's where kids get themselves into really tricky situations and they're no longer at the school is troubled, the parents are troubled, and it gets complicated. And so then it ends up on my table. And then I work with all the parties to see if we can come up with a resolution. So I had a young lady sitting across the table from me. I had known her from the elementary school. I was principal at Upland Elementary. She was a fabulous, fabulous young girl. Straight A student, involved in lots of things, have highly engaged with her family. Her family were amazing. And then I was presented with this situation where she was pushing the principal. She was telling the principal to fuck off. She was banging lockers. She was showing up late. She was coming drunk. And this huge disconnect between this human being that I had known for quite some time and then this situation in front of me. And I couldn't grasp where the behavior was coming from. Behavior is communication. We know that. I knew that something had happened. I didn't know what, and I didn't know how to find out because nobody seemed to know. She'd just gone from being a straight A student to completely going off the rails. I don't tend to let things lie. It was a niggling feeling. So I started to do some exploring. I started to talk more. I started to do my own personal investigation as to what had happened. I'm going to skip to the end because we have lots that we need to do. But what I found out is this young lady had been trafficked. It was a purposeful male who had done a long game. He had introduced her to vaping, and then after vaping, somebody else introduced her to an older boyfriend. Then she was involved with this older boyfriend, who she considered a boyfriend. He was her boyfriend. And then he abused her. He tied her up. He raped her. He assaulted her. He damaged her to such an extent that she lost who she was. She lost all humanity. She was struggling. She was angry. She was confused. She didn't know what to do. By this time, she was relying on alcohol and drugs to get through the day. We lost her. We weren't able to keep her in the school system. This is a success story, but human trafficking ends in death. Kids don't survive if they get into human trafficking. This is one story where this young lady at the moment is still alive. She's going to school and she has a plan. Now, if I hadn't have known what was happening to her, I think we would have lost. So we need to know that it's alive and well in terrorist victims, and we have a job to do. We have a job to educate ourselves. We have a job to educate others, and we have a job to help people that are trapped and help inform them of what's happening in their lives and provide them with assistance. Our next step is to make sure that we share information with those that can create change. So I'm going to introduce you to two ladies who can create change, and they have been the pillars that I've leaned on as I've traveled this journey. I knew nothing about human trafficking apart from what I saw in the movies. And it's not like movies. It looks very, very different. So I'm going to, let's just do a shout out to the technology gods and that they work for me today. I'm going to get Kathy Peters to come on. So Kathy, if you're there. Okay. Hello, Kathy.
Hi there.
Hi, do you want to switch your camera on?
I just did from this end.
Okay. I saw you earlier and I saw your room. I'm going to get Chris to, where is my handy dandy tech guy? He's going to chat to you, Kathy, to see if we can figure out why your camera's on. At least everybody can hear you. While we're just figuring out that piece, I'm going to introduce who Kathy is. So Kathy was an educator, is an educator. I don't think you ever stopped being a teacher. She's a passionate anti-human trafficking advocate and educator in British Columbia, Canada, which I think makes her very unique. Most people involved in human trafficking that you end up talking to are in the States or in Ontario, not in BC. So Kathy is able to really share what it looks and feels like in BC. She's the founder of an amazing website and company called Be Amazing Canada. You will see her pamphlets on the table. Please take her pamphlets away with you. They're specifically there for you to take home. There is one specifically designed for those working in the health industry, in the health system. And there is also one specifically designed to support Indigenous youth. Indigenous youth, especially females, are the most vulnerable to being trafficked. So if you need Kathy to assist you at any time, she will be there. You just pick up the phone, you email her, and she'll be there for you. Kathy's been raising awareness about human sex trafficking and sexual exploitation and child sex trafficking since 2014. She's a former inner city high school teacher. Kathy has made over 650 presentations to over 20,000 people, including politicians, police, and the public. Her book, Child Sex Trafficking in Canada and How to Stop It, provides a comprehensive overview on what you can do and how you can create change. I have several books. They are gifts and prizes today. So it's not a happy gift, but it is worth reading. So I'll be handing that out. Also, Angela Sterrett. If you're from the Hazeltons, you may recognize this name. She is a former Hazelton secondary student, and this is her perspective on what it looks and feels like in the Hazeltons in a novel format. So if you're engaged, if you're interested, if you ask questions or put your hand up, you may well be lucky enough to get a prize of a trafficking. Okay. Look, I'm so glad. I said to Chris, this is Chris. Chris, everybody. I said to Chris this morning, don't leave me, because when I touch technology, it all falls apart. And then the tech guy comes and they just look at it and it magically works. Anyway, Kathy, I'm going to put you on. Oh, no, view. I want view. Yeah. All right, Kathy, I'm going to hand it over to you. We are already over in our time. We've done really well at timekeeping this morning. So, Kathy, I'll pass it over to you.
Good, thanks so much. So my name is Kathy Peters. I was an inner city high school teacher 45 years ago. For the past 11 years, I've been raising awareness as a prevention educator about the crime of human sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, and child sex trafficking. It is the fastest growing crime globally, in Canada and locally. BC is particularly vulnerable with 3 ports, international airports, easy access to the US border. So my website is beamazingcampaign.org. All the information you need is right there. My brand new book is called Child Sex Trafficking in Canada and How to Stop It. It's a textbook on the issue for Canada. I have just completed writing my 2nd edition, which will be available in about a month. I have 2 new booklets, one for the Indigenous and then one for frontline health providers. These are excellent, and they're a summary of presentations I have done. So I am observing 5 trends. Number 1, With the full decriminalization of hard drugs in BC, drug use amongst youth has exploded and become normalized, accepted. Once youth are easily hooked, they will sell their bodies to get more drugs. Sex trafficking explodes. The full decrim of hard drugs needs to be repealed. Number two, with a massive immigration and a weakened economy in Canada, human trafficking, crime, and prostitution is increasing. Number three, sexting, which is sending nude photos, is being normalized, so sextortion, online grooming and luring and recruiting for the sex industry is increasing. There's an increase in the sexualization of youth and children, which in turn increases childhood sexual assault and incest, and now child on child sexual assault. Number four, there's a lack of digital safety training, social media accountability, positive parenting support, and there's a lack of education to teach men and boys not to exploit women and girls. Number five, the unchecked development of artificial intelligence or AI. Human trafficking is the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, harboring, or exercising control over a person for the purpose of exploiting them. Here are the stats. 13 years old is the average age of recruitment. In urban centers, the target age is now 10 to 12 years of age. 50 to 90% in the sex trade are Indigenous. They are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. 82% involved in prostitution had childhood sexual abuse or incest. 72% live with complex PTSD. 95% in prostitution want to leave. It is not a choice or a job. 90 to 99% of prostituted persons are pimped or trafficked. So organized crime and international crime syndicates are involved. Only 1 to 5% of individuals get out of the sex industry. The majority experience mental illness, drug addiction, commit suicide, or are murdered. The most notorious cases in Canada are from the Lower Mainland. Amanda Todd, victim, Robert Picton, sex buyer and gruesome serial killer, and Reza Mazami, trafficker. I've been raising awareness about sexual exploitation and child sex trafficking to every city council, regional district, MLA, MP, school board, and police agency in BC since the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act became federal law in 2014. So the police would enforce it, the public would understand it and be able to report it. So the law has four parts. Number one, it targets the demand by criminalizing the buyer of sex and the profiteers. So NTEC, which is the National Center of Sexual Exploitation out of Washington, D.C., has done a report why sex buyers must be stopped and how to do it. Number two, recognizes the seller of sex as a victim who is immune from prosecution. Number three, exit strategies are in place to assist the victim out of the sex trade. Number four, robust prevention education programs are in place so youth, children, and the vulnerable are not pulled into the sex industry. So this law focuses on the source of harm, the buyers of sex and the profiteers. The clear statement from Parliament was that girls and women in Canada are not for sale, that they are full human beings with dignity and human rights. This law is not enforced in BC. Unless the sex buyers are deterred, this crime will continue to explode. Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal are global sex tourism hotspots. Canada is a child sex tourism destination. The global sex trade is growing very fast. It's targeting children because children is where the money is. It's fueled by the internet where most of the luring is taking place. The U.S. Surgeon General is recommending no social media platforms until ages 16 to 18 years of age, and no smartphones until at least 15. Dumb phones are a better option than smartphones. Phones need to be removed from all schools in BC. Contributing factors to a rapidly growing sex industry are globalization, unregulated technology, limited law enforcement, and very little prevention education. Canada has a new National Human Trafficking Hotline number. Everybody should know this and call it. They're open 24/7 and 200 different languages. Provincially, Victim Link has a helpline. Communities need to reduce demand by addressing complicit businesses and diminish the supply by education and public awareness. What are the businesses involved? Unregistered massage and body rub parlors, nail spas, day spas, modeling agencies, tattoo parlors, escort services, cheap bars and hotels, men's clubs, Airbnb, VRBO, casinos, strip clubs, organized crime clubhouses, bus stops, homeless camps, tent cities, and work camps can be typical covers for sexual exploitation. In Terrace, I understand the work camps at Kitimat have been a problem. The men make a lot of money. Then they come to Terrace to buy girls, drugs, and alcohol. BC relies on the resource sector economically. So these companies must have a zero tolerance for alcohol, drugs, and prostitution. Prostitution is illegal in Canada, but because the federal law is not enforced in BC, it appears to be de facto legalized. Sweden has a similar law as Canada, where men and boys understand gender equality, and prostitution is not accepted or normalized there. So it is possible to stop sexual exploitation. The key is to reach the premier so he understands the federal law needs to be enforced. The sex industry is targeting youth online. Schools are recruiting grounds for gangs. This is even occurring in elementary schools. An effective deterrent is a school liaison officer program. Officers prevent crime and protect the vulnerable. Pornography is a public health crisis. Along with childhood sexual assault, pornography is a pipeline to prostitution. Online pornography is grooming our children. Mass-scale prevention education is needed in this country. So there are two protective factors. Number one, a caring, consistent adult. The ideal, of course, is two parents. So youth can learn to take responsibility. And number two is to finish grade 12. Because I think you're a bit tight for time, I'm really going to jump ahead. Who are the victims? Typically, they are female, but due to popularity of online gaming sites, it's a growing number of boys. Who are the traffickers? Typically, they are male, but now we have female traffickers who recruit their peers. Traffickers today are highly organized, sophisticated, move very fast. Organized crime and even sometimes family members are involved. Who are the buyers? Male buyers come from all ages and demographics. They are the root cause of the harm caused by human trafficking. If there were no buyers, there would be no business. So what can you do? Learn about the issue, share with family and friends, alert politicians and police. In BC, it's really quite simple. There needs to be enforcement and there needs to be education. And I just want to say, because I understand there's RCMP there, how do you deter demand? I'm always asked that. Whole bunch of things you can do. You can seize the car, you can give fines, buyer arrests, use cameras, and you can do this in your schools in vulnerable areas. Employment loss, they have to do community service, IT-based tactics, John School's work, send them a letter, license suspension, have a neighborhood action plan, public education, of course, reverse stings, identity disclosure, and any money that you get from fines can go towards paying for prevention, and some of it can also pay for law enforcement. And thanks very much, and I hope there's going to be some questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Kathy while she's here? She travels around a lot, so we're pretty lucky to have Kathy. I feel very lucky to have met Kathy, had time on the phone with her, had time on Zoom with her. She has been, Kathy, I just want to say you have made yourself so available to me that I can't say enough. Without you, it would have been tough because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to ask for help, and you really supported me with that. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions at this time for Kathy?
I do.
Jackie?
Sorry, Jesse, I'm so loud. I'm so new to this, but like, is there any way to hold young men accountable for? Sorry, I'm having a hard time using the language. Or like assault or abuse of young women. And filming it and like doing that without their knowing or with their knowing, like and just having it. Is there any way to hold them accountable?
Did you hear that, Kathy?
I didn't.
Is there any way to hold youth accountable for the assaults that they inflict on others when they video and share that video? Did I capture that?
I think so.
Yeah. What kind of criminal acts does that violate? Do you know?
Oh, well, I mean, you got the RCMP there. I would like to say it's really important. Anything going on, report the police. That's the first thing to do. You've got to report it. You see, police complain to me, they don't get the reports. Nothing's going to stop unless you start reporting. And it may not be one report is going to do it. It might have to be 10 reports, and then the police start to see a pattern. Then they will typically address. The problem in BC, please understand everybody, the police are not getting the funding they need, and they're not getting the training. I mean, I just finished training all of Coquitlam RCMP, Burnaby RCMP. I just finished training Surrey Police Service. I mean, there's just not the training happening in British Columbia. As a result, so you all have context, BC is the worst for this crime in the whole country. Organized crime know this. They are pouring into BC, and the traffickers, just so you all know, are scouring every corner of British Columbia and Yukon looking for fresh supply. Like I said, it's kind of de facto legalized prostitution in BC because that federal law is not being enforced here. So all of your communities are vulnerable to this. So the very, very first step I would say to all of you is please, please report to your police. They should be your best friends, and let your politicians know at the civic level, at the provincial level, and at the federal level. I present to all three levels of government all the time. They all know me. And just so you all know, this Friday I'm presenting to all the mayors in the Lower Mainland. That's 23 mayors, because they know this crime has exploded and there's no deterrent at this time to stop it. But education, prevention education will stop it.
Just to jump off your point, Kathy, I have to say thank you to Laurie. I've been in the school district now many years, and Laurie, I feel like we had a conversation, and you actually, you are the first RCMP member to actually come to my office and have a conversation and ask me, well, Julia, what is happening? And I too learned, Kathy, that it's reporting. How do we enable youth to report? Because they're very scared. They're worried they're going to be hurt. They're worried they're going to be killed. And these are real fears. So how do we build relationships with youth so they feel comfortable going to RCMP and sharing? So we have to bridge that gap together. And I feel like Northern Health, you probably have experience and know of youth and young adults who you question what's happening, what is going on, and then wanting to develop that relation, but not knowing where to go next, because you know there's red flags, you know something is happening. So how do we together build relationships with our community members so that we can then bridge the gap with RCMP so they can start doing their work? Yes, Carly.
I think a huge part of human trafficking in BC is industry. We have to be real about what's happening in the north and where we're extracting resources, and that's where this is happening. So beyond RCMP, we have to hold industry accountable, and they should be funding solutions. It's just
So you will love Sue Brown.
Yeah.
Because that's how Sue and I met. So I would say what we've experienced here in the Northwest is multiple different types of trafficking. So we've had entrepreneurial trafficking, where young males who whatever have managed to understand how to manipulate particularly girls, and they have risen up and they have followed a playbook, and it is absolutely the playbook, and they have ruined lives to the point where these girls have died. And they are young males that they're not, in my mind, what I consider connected to a larger gang. Then we have youth, we have girls in one of our schools who somehow they are given cell phones and they believe that they now have a boyfriend. They've never even met this guy. And they feel that this person is their boyfriend and they're connected and they can't wait to meet them. And then the boyfriend says, oh, we're going to go to a party. I'm going to come pick you up. They haven't even met this person, yet they trust them enough because the youth that they are preying on want to be loved. And when you have someone telling you, you're great, you're beautiful, I love you, you're my girlfriend, I'm going to pick you up, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to support you all the time. You're hearing all the things that you want to hear. Then they go and they're taken to kidnap, they're taken to a party. And multiple things happen. They are either given free drugs and then afterwards told that those drugs are not free, and then they've got to figure out how to pay them. They then get them addicted to drugs, and so then they have the secondary problem. How do I pay for that? I don't have the money. Then they're like, okay, well, maybe you just want to sleep with my friend. It's okay, he's my friend. I have no idea how they manage to manipulate the mind so much that these girls will then be compliant with what they're asking them. Or there will be a rape, a sexual assault, and it is a planned rape. This is not by accident. It didn't just happen. It is a planned rape. Then the boyfriend comes in as the hero. I can't believe that happened to you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to rescue you. But they then isolate them. They know they have humiliated, the shame. They're doing drugs now. They're drinking alcohol. They're going to parties. They're hanging out with older guys. They've been assaulted multiple times. They end up in a space of giving up, an absolute shame. We had one young lady who unfortunately is now, she's passed. She never ever recovered from what happened to her. She, the boyfriend ended up just using her. He would take her to a party where there were multiple older men. They would all use her. She would phone her mum. She was still connected to her mum. She still called the trafficker her boyfriend. She still defended that boyfriend. Yet she phoned mum, and mum would come to the home where these guys were, and she'd pick up that girl and take her home. And she'd last 2 days, and she'd be gone again. And that young lady just died. We have to come together to stop this, because I don't want another young lady that I know to die. And Kathy, unfortunately, has heard horrific stories from across the province. And now we become besties. Don't know how that happened, but you know, you find friends in the strangest of places. And Kathy, I have to say, I appreciate everything you do. I appreciate that you're out there championing. I appreciate that you are explaining the law to people and what they can do, and that you have a bit of a playbook. We don't have any excuse any longer to say we don't know what to do. So keep writing, keep producing your publications, and keep educating, and we will chat again soon. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Hold on, Julia, we've got one question.
I'm going to rush. If you have more questions, like I said, this is a starting point. Please email all your questions to myself, email them, go on the Teams and send all the questions. And then my hope is that your organization, because I don't have the time to dedicate my whole, like all of my career to human trafficking, even though it has been all consuming. I want your organizations to decide, what are you going to do? What are you seeing and how are you going to create change? So my hope is that those questions get asked at your committee tables and your staff meetings and say, I want to make a change too. Is that okay? Because I need to keep up with the time and Sue's sitting in the background. But you can phone Kathy. Kathy, you just pick up the phone and ask Kathy for help. She will help you. So thanks, Kathy. I'm going to move on. Get rid of situation table. Goodbye, situation table. Not there today. Okay, Alexis. And I'm going to move over to Sue. Okay. Okay, Sue, if you want to unmute and then just speak quickly, I think we'll flip Kathy out and then you'll come into the speaker.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, I don't know why. I'm going to get Chris. Can you make it so that Kathy's, that Sue's the bigger picture? Okay, Sue, I'll do a quick bio on Sue. Sue Brown is a dedicated human rights lawyer and advocate based in BC, Canada. She's a director of an advocacy and she's a staff lawyer at a Vancouver-based NGO, Justice for Girls. Remember the name, Justice for Girls. If you need help, if you need support, she is another incredible lifeline that you will want to connect with. Sue has been a champion for the rights of marginalized girls and young women for over 15 years. She's called to law societies of BC, Ontario, and Yukon. Sue's work focuses on addressing issues such as poverty, homelessness, access to education, prisoner justice, police accountability, violence, abuse, exploitation, human trafficking, climate justice, and Indigenous rights. Sue's commitment to human rights and justice is evident in her efforts to support the families of missing, trafficked, and murdered women and girls, helping them navigate the justice system and advocating for stronger laws through investigations. Her work has taken her inside of Canada's maximum security prisons, to the dark alleys of Vancouver's downtown east side, and to remote communities along BC's notorious Highway of Tears. I was lucky enough to meet Sue, and Sue, I can't say enough amazing things about you, but I will stop talking and hand it over to you. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you, everybody, for giving me some time this morning. I think this is a really important conversation and one that we don't have enough in the province of British Columbia. Thank you so much to Kathy for actually establishing all the facts. I was going to share some of the same statistics, so I have more opportunity to share about the work that we're doing and why I think this conversation is so incredibly important. Our work at Justice for Girls has been ongoing for 25 years. We were founded in 1999. The co-founders of our organization, Annabelle Webb and Carmen Benoit, came together when Annabelle was an outreach worker on the downtown east side of Vancouver, and Carmen was a youth who was accessing her services. And together they realized that the services provided for women and the services provided for youth did not meet the unique needs of teenage girls in particular. And that there was a gap in services for girls who were experiencing violence, poverty, homelessness, and other issues impacting their human rights. So together they formed Justice for Girls with the vision of advocating for the rights and equality of teenage girls who live in poverty. Our mandate is quite limited in that we advocate for teenage girls between the ages of 12 to 18, because we recognize that at that age, they have a very specific legal and human rights entitlements and very specific and unique needs that are not often understood or met by services and institutions that are designed to be protecting them and responding and preventing violence against them. Because many of those teenage girls that we work with who live in poverty are also involved in the foster care system, many of whom are housing insecure. There are also issues with poverty, and that particular population of girls experiences some of the highest and most extreme rates of violence and exploitation and sexual violence of any population. If you look at statistics, violent statistics in British Columbia and across the board in Canada, and you disaggregate it by age, gender, and type of violence, you will see that the absolute highest rate of violence, controlling for all factors, is against teenage girls between the ages of 14 and 20. And it's due to high rates of sexual violence specifically. And that includes human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So our organization focuses on advocating for the rights and equality of girls, particularly in response to violence, recognizing that sexual violence and exploitation is the greatest threat to girls' human rights entitlements globally. And so we conceptualize and understand sexual violence and human trafficking within a human rights framework and an international human rights framework. So we understand that human trafficking is in and of itself a human rights violation as defined in international law as well as in domestic law, and that girls have a right to live free from violence, and that violence and exploitation is the single greatest threat to teenage girls and women's equality in Canada and globally as well. So we work at all levels. We work locally, we work with politicians at all levels of government domestically, and we also work at international levels, not only to advocate for the rights of teenage girls in Canada, but also to shape the conversation. And our organization is the only organization of our kind in Canada, and one of the very few internationally who specifically focuses on girls' human rights. And we've been pivotal in shaping the dialogue internationally and maintain consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations to push forward an understanding of girls' rights. It's also important to note that our organization is Indigenous-led. We have Indigenous leadership at all levels of our organization. And what's very unique about our organization and central to the way that we do our work is that our work is guided by the lived experiences of the girls who work in our organization as interns and as advisors. But many of those interns and advisors have come up in our organization into leadership roles. And most of us working in this area have lived experience in the areas that we work in. So nothing about us without us is something that's really important and core to the way that we do our work and core to how we understand the best responses to human trafficking. We apply a human rights lens, which means we incorporate much of the international human rights framework on how to respond to trafficking, which is really grown out of the Palermo Protocol, which was the protocol that was designed at the international level and actually defines human trafficking as a criminal offense and defines what a country state level approach and systemic approach needs to include in order to effectively respond to trafficking. And the Palermo Protocol says that to effectively respond to trafficking, we need to, first of all, establish measures in our communities and at all levels of government to prevent trafficking, to protect survivors of trafficking. That includes protect them while they're being trafficked, but also protect them and help them to exit. We need to prosecute traffickers and properly investigate and thoroughly and effectively investigate. And fourth, we need to build partnerships. Now, Canada has a national strategy to end human trafficking. We've had a strategy for the past 5 years, and it has just come to an end now. It's just where the federal government is currently reevaluating and reestablishing the next 4-year strategy to end human trafficking. But that strategy is actually built around those 4 pillars that I just explained. And what is really important for everybody here in this room to know is that that fourth one, the partnership, pillar is the one that's most often forgotten. We talk a lot about prevention. We talk a lot about investigation and prosecution. We do talk about protection, but not enough. But we almost never talk about partnerships. And what we're doing in this room today is that fourth pillar. We're developing partnerships. And what I see is the most important thing that we need is in our communities and in British Columbia is to come together and break down the silos between our various areas of work, break down the silos between police, between child welfare, between our education system, and between civil society organizations and nonprofit advocacy organizations like ours to come together, because those gaps is where the girls that we work with are falling through more time and time and time again. Those girls who are shifting between various different regions and might have various different social workers, for example, the girls who are dropping out of school and no longer have access to education, the girls who aren't coming to the police because they don't trust the police. If we come together and we have these conversations and we promote holistic human rights and empowering approaches to responding to exploitation and human trafficking, then we are going to be the antidote and the solution to the proliferation of trafficking and exploitation in British Columbia. So I just want to thank everybody for coming together, first of all, to have this conversation and to hear a little bit about how we understand human trafficking. I would like to echo what Kathy Peters was saying about British Columbia, is that we have an absolute epidemic of trafficking happening in this province right now, and we do not have the systems and frameworks in place to properly address it. And that includes, we don't necessarily have people who are working frontline with girls educated in human trafficking to identify the signs of human trafficking, but we also don't necessarily have those frontline service providers educated in how to work with survivors of trafficking. And what we do in our approach to the way that we work with girls is an empowerment approach. It's an approach that puts survivors first and gives them the power to define the responses and solutions to trafficking and exploitation in their lives. We get beside them to create safety plans and work with the trusted people in their lives to build communities of safety around them so that we can help make it safer for them to reintegrate back into their lives, reintegrate back into the school, reintegrate back into their families or into the communities in which they're living, and support them to make decisions about whether to come forward and report to police. The truth of the matter is that the girls that we work with are incredibly marginalized, and the lack of trust that they have for the people in their lives is the single greatest reason that they don't come forward and report when they're experiencing trafficking and exploitation. So the work that we do alongside girls is to get beside them and help build that trust and help show them that there are people who they can trust, and that the systems can work for them. We try to enhance their access to justice, and we do that by providing accompaniments for forensic interviews. We provide accompaniments for court and other support to ensure that girls have access to the testimonial accommodations, for example, and other court accommodations to improve their experiences with the justice system. We work to support them to find housing and safe and adequate supports in the community. We help them reconnect with school if possible. We provide internships that also helps girls get access to education, and most importantly, we work to bridge the conversation between girls and law enforcement, or girls and other trusted adults in their lives, to start having a conversation about what's happening to them and start to actually build a solution to help them exit trafficking. The truth of the matter is that the average life expectancy for a trafficking victim is 7 years. And many of the girls that we work with were lured and groomed into trafficking between the ages of 11 and 13 years old. And it's awful to say, but some of them didn't make it, and many of them don't make it until the age of 19 when they become adults. So we really have to focus a lot of our energy and attention on youth and our responses to children who are being trafficked. And so that's what our organization does. We work beside youth and work alongside frontline service providers to improve your responses. We provide training. We have some partnerships with a couple of universities. We provide training to social work student, healthcare students. We provide training to law enforcement and to educators as well as social workers to improve your responses to girls and share with you what girls have told us they need. Because at the core of what we do is supporting girls to be the experts and the voices of their own experiences. It's not for us to define what they need or for us to define what the solutions are, but it's for us to get beside them and empower them to define the solutions and the responses so that we can empower them to make change in their communities. Of interest and note, actually, Angela Sterrett was one of our interns many years ago. And there have been many other leaders that have come from our organization who continue to promote this approach and these conversations and advocate for girls' equality. So I will leave it there, except to say that should you have any questions at all about a young woman that you might be working with who you think is experiencing trafficking and you're not sure how to have the conversation with her, if you are working with a group of young women and you would like to invite our organization to come in and do small workshops with girls to educate them about their rights and also about trafficking and consent and healthy relationships, we would be more than happy to do that. We can provide training to your organization if that's helpful. And as a lawyer at Justice for Girls, one of my areas of expertise is in criminal. I have a background in criminal law and an understanding of the investigation and prosecution of human trafficking, and I can help to advise particularly young women who might be considering making reports and support them to make the report to the police in a safe way, and can also work to advocate for them throughout the justice system experience. So thank you very much, Julia.
Thank you, Sue. I just can't say enough. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for the work that you've done with the girls here in Terrace. And we will chat again. So thank you so much. I am just going to finish up my portion and then I'm going to hand it over to Kelly. I've got, that's minus minutes. So Kelly, I don't know if you want to come up and play around with the computer while I just finish up this section. Because I know technology is the fantastic. The reason that I brought Kathy Peters on today and the reason that I brought Sue is because my hope is that you will reach out, that you will ask them for training, that you will ask them for help, that you have girls that you want to connect with them, that you have the next step, that you can take your system and your organization onto a pathway of change, and so that we can actually put a stop to what's happening here in our community in the Northwest. So you haven't really, I think Kelly's actually going to talk about what does it look like, what are the signs that you're going to see. This is more about what are you going to do about it. It's great to know, but now we need to make a change. So my hope is that together we take care of our kids, we take care of our youth, we take care of our communities, we work together with them. So Kelly, are you ready to roll?
I think so.
I will officially hand it over to Kelly.
As long as this all cooperates, I am ready to go. I'm
Okay.
gonna try not to dwell on too much stuff in here because I think that Kathy and Sue have actually touched on a lot of stuff and Lori's probably gonna hit a lot of the similar points as well. So I will try to keep it moving. As I said earlier, my name's Kelly. I have met a lot of you. And I think maybe my biggest takeaway today for you guys from me is that as a community police officer, especially any connections in schools out there or any agencies really, I guess, is that I'm available to be used and abused by you guys if you want me in the schools, connecting with students, or any other things that you can think of that I can be of use. Just connecting with the youth, please feel free to reach out and give me a call. A lot of you do have my contacts already, but it's pretty simple to get a hold of me, just calling the detachment and asking for Kelly. Okay, so this will be a task for me to try and figure out how to make the screen match where I'm at. Okay. So there's 3 common types of human trafficking, and so far, for the purpose of today's meeting, our focus is really just on number 1, the sex trafficking angle of it. And as Kathy mentioned, it can occur in nightclubs, modeling studios, hospitals, shelters, on the internet, through escort services, or in terrace, where we might not have all of those things. Often we'll perceive it to be in places such as downtown terrace, on the streets, or even just in private residences or hotels. And who is at risk of human trafficking? Everyone. Mostly we're focused on females, our victims. They're the biggest ones at risk. But a lot of times we think it's never going to happen to us, or it's never going to happen to our kids because our kids are in good homes and they're safe. Is it just going to happen to our homeless population? Is it just going to happen to kids in broken homes or the low-income families? Yes and no. That might be where we see the biggest demographic, where it's happening to kids who might be facing more difficult times than the kids in what we call the good homes. But those kids are definitely at risk as well. The victims can be anyone. It can be any age, any gender, any social status or ethnicity. It can happen to people in our own families or social circles, and it most certainly is happening in our town, which is why we're here. Traffickers will often look for victims who are naive, trusting, or may have low self-esteem or looking for acceptance. Victims may be people seeking independence from their families. Traffickers often start out by making their victims feel wonderful, giving compliments and extra attention, as we've heard already. I think Julia mentioned the long game, and our traffickers are willing to play the long game. Unfortunately, one thing that can make it very difficult for police to investigate is when the victim doesn't want to talk to police. That is a huge obstacle. There's so many reasons associated to why they don't want to talk to police. Shame is a big one. But sometimes they get to the point where they're dependent on their trafficker. When they're willingly going back to their trafficker because it feeds their addiction, it just makes it challenging for us. Why would anyone come to report their situation to police when they need to keep going back to feed their addictions and get stuck in this cycle of come talk to police? Well, I don't want to talk to police because they need to go, they go back, they become reliant on it. I won't get too much into that. I know Lori's going to get into some things on the investigational side of things. How do traffickers recruit? Friendship is a key recruiting technique. Friends play a central role in recruiting in order to give a sense of belonging. Often girls recruit other girls on behalf of their trafficker. Sometimes that girl is older and recruits younger girls and might target girls that appear to have low self-esteem or other personal difficulties. Then they get introduced to the trafficker, who might continue the honeymoon phase, as I call it, showering that girl with gifts and parties and cigarettes or drugs or alcohol or whatever that item is that the girl is drawn to. Other more violent methods can be used as well, such as extortion or kidnapping or physical abuse. In some cases, the recruiter comes in the form of a love interest, maybe an older male who can shower them with gifts and romancing them, or simply getting them hooked on drugs. Or as we've heard already this morning in our own schools, it starts with vaping and providing vapes to these young girls. So where do our traffickers recruit? Where don't they recruit? Maybe is the bigger question. It can happen anywhere: schools, on the streets, in shopping malls, at parties, restaurants, youth facilities, shelters, bars, on the internet. Anywhere that youth are is where it can happen. And then we get to the point of isolation and intimidation. Once the honeymoon stage is over and the victim has been recruited or the trust has been built, the relationship starts to change. The victim will usually be isolated from their previous life. They're often taken to a different location where physical or sexual abuse begins. Communication with family or friends may be taken away. ID can be taken away. Cell phones might be taken away. The victim begins to feel very trapped with no way out. We have a couple of quick videos. First one, we'll see.
I'm Amy. I did really well in school. I had a lot of friends, but I really hated the way I looked. I started dating Ryan. He just seemed really interested in me. He gave me a lot of attention. He loved me. He just made me feel really good about myself. We talked a lot about what we wanted and the future. I was in love with him. After 2 months, he started telling me he had money problems. He told me his friend's girlfriend was opening a massage parlor, and I should go and work there.
Sex trafficking is when someone is forced to sell sex against their will. This is happening right under our noses. It could be happening to a girl just like a girl you know. They are lured in public places, schools, malls, and online.
All our victims to date have come from Toronto or somewhere else in Canada.
The girls that I work with are 16 to 24. I do get calls about girls as young as 12 and 13 years old. They can be an ace student at school, but still not have self-confidence. So that is a common thread with all the girls that I work with.
He told me it would only be for a little while. You know, we would make all this money and buy a house. I was working 12 hours a day. I was in so much pain from having sex.
The way that they lure the girls is to romance them, compliment them that they're pretty, to buy them nice things, to shower them with attention.
Girls, they fall in love with these guys. These guys become their boyfriends at first.
I had this total breakdown, and I was crying, and I told him, I don't know if I could do this, letting these guys be all over me. He was like, you better figure out how to deal with it, because I'm not going to be with a girl who isn't giving me money.
Typically, one girl could make a pimp about $250,000 a year. And that's just one girl. It's very lucrative. It's as lucrative or even more lucrative than selling firearms or drugs.
And I'm hearing conversations like, if we killed her, like we can just bury her somewhere up north and no one will ever find her. I was just so scared. And the thought going through my head is that he really could have killed me.
The trafficker imposes lots of rules on the girls, so they're not allowed to eat or sleep without his permission. They're not allowed to go out on their own. Even if they are, he is watching their every move, and they know not to go against what he's telling them they have to do.
I felt so much shame and guilt. And I still didn't understand that I'd been pimped out.
Some of the red flags to look for when you suspect someone might be sex trafficked. The girl has nice, expensive clothing. She's going out and she's not telling you where she's going. Her grades at school might start to slip, and her world becomes more and more secretive. She talks about having a boyfriend in her life, but she's not going to introduce that guy to the family. My hope for these girls is they reclaim their lives and go after their dreams and have a good life.
Okay, so how can you tell if someone is being trafficked? Oftentimes, you can't. Sometimes it's intentionally being hidden. Sometimes you can tell. Sometimes they don't have control of their money. Maybe they're always being picked up and dropped off, and their movements are restricted. Maybe they seem to be fearful of someone or seem to be controlled by someone. Maybe they appear malnourished, or maybe they have visible injuries such as bruising. Or maybe, like the student we heard about earlier, they were an A student and suddenly overnight it seems like they're banging on lockers and acting out. Sometimes in the different occupations represented here in this room, these victims come across our paths in the form of an assault or a sex assault in the ER. Sometimes these scenarios turn up in conversations with youth workers or counselors. And sometimes these assaults are reported to police. No matter where they turn up, we need to all be paying attention for the signs, because oftentimes our victims don't even recognize that they're being trafficked. Human trafficking and the law. Lori brought the criminal code for us this morning, so that's some great reading if anyone wants to kill some time with the criminal code. If a victim consents to an act, this is not a defense to a human trafficking charge, which means no one can legally consent to being exploited in Canada. We say that our victims are participating willingly. That doesn't mean we can't pursue a charge. They can't say, well, we're consenting. There is no such thing as consenting to being exploited. Section 279 of the Criminal Code addresses the offense of trafficking in persons. It says, bear with me because this is not fun reading. Every person who recruits, transports, transfers, receives, holds, conceals, or harbors a person, or exercises control, direction, or influence over the movements of a person for the purpose of exploiting them or facilitating their exploitation is guilty of an indictable offense. So breaking that down into 3 elements to the offense of human trafficking, this is the police side of things of what we have to prove in order to get charges. So it means police would have to prove 3 things to get a charge for trafficking. Number 1, at least one of the following things must be proved: that they were recruited or transported, transferred, harbored, or received by a person. Number 2, at least one of those methods must be proved that it was through violence, threat or use of force, coercion, deception, abduction, or abuse of power against another person. And the third thing to be proved is that all those things were done for the purpose of exploiting another person for financial gain or material benefit through sexual exploitation, forced labor, or organ trafficking. I do have one more video, which doesn't flow quite as smoothly, but give it a try. That's pretty close to it for what I have. A final thought is, why do victims stay? I think that's one of the hardest things to wrap your mind around as somebody on the outside. That one girl said, I didn't have a choice, even though I did have a choice. And probably most of us in this room would just say, well, just get out. We'll just walk away. It's very simplistic, I think, from the outside looking in, but they gave a little bit of a glimpse into the fear that is very real for them, the sense of ownership that they feel that they're owned by these people. Their perception is very different from the inside being trafficked than what our perspective might be from the outside. And the common factors are often the shame, the guilt, the judgment, or fear of injury, either to themselves or to their families. So those factors make it very difficult for victims to break free and makes it very difficult for agencies to assist and for RCMP to investigate. I'm going to pass it over to Lori or Julia in the meantime, to kind of talk a little bit more about the investigational side of this.
Perfect. I start my slideshow. Okay, here we are. Thanks, Kelly. No, I'm not a tech person. That's why I have to get someone to come help me all the time, but I drafted this slideshow, so it's not as awesome and cool as Kelly's, so bear with me. So I feel like I've gone over this in my mind so many times leading up to today, but basically what we do at the police station, obviously we're going to be investigating these. Obviously during investigations like this, we're going to be relying on our partners, which is you guys, to assist with basically witness management on that level. Kind of an introduction on a witness level, witness management level, but I don't want to deviate too much from my slideshow here. So just a few things I'm going to chat about. Obviously, one of them being priorities of law enforcement, and then a victim-supported approach. And then things to consider if anybody ever should receive a disclosure from anybody stating that they have been sexually trafficked. So obviously, priority one is victim safety. So we're in the business of public safety, which is victim safety. In the event of imminent danger, if you guys have a client that is being sexually trafficked and they come to you and they say, hey, I'm being sexually trafficked, obviously, please consider 911 if that is something that requires, obviously, immediate attention, right? We'll sit through the rest of it later. Obviously, as police, we look to things like evidence collection, whether it be holding scenes, we're looking for DNA, we're looking for any evidence that we'll be able to capture that's going to corroborate what our victim is going to tell us in a statement down the road. That is super critical to a successful prosecution, all right? And primarily our role as police is to basically look at an investigation at the onset and make decisions that will have legal considerations and implications that we want to ensure that we're taking into account as we progress through investigations so that it's going to meet the scrutiny in court and things like that. Obviously, this is a great opportunity, even if you have a victim that is, is in the midst of talking to you guys, building trust with you guys as perhaps caseworkers or whatever your role may be. It is a perfect opportunity for us as police to start to embed ourselves with your client. And when I say that, I mean is the trust building process at this point in time. Not every victim is going to be willing to talk right off the hop. Sometimes it's going to take a couple of meet and greets with police or whoever the case might be, that we start that trust building exercise. And finally, they say, you know what? Yeah, I do like this police officer. I'm going to come talk to them. Typically, we don't like to encourage cop shopping, but in cases where we want to instill that trust and we want to build on it, we'll take what we can get. First and foremost, obviously, when we have victims that are coming forward with this, we recognize this is a critical approach. Police officers do have training available to them that's a trauma-informed approach, and we utilize this in almost every facet of policing that we're involved in. Obviously, the first thing that we want to ensure is that our victim, whoever that person may be, whatever their age is, that they get the appropriate medical supports required immediately. We want to make sure that they have food. Sometimes they haven't had a chance to touch in with family. We want to make sure that they feel safe. And we also want to start giving them that opportunity to have that voice. Basically, we need to get them ready so that if they do decide they do want to talk to police, they're in a much better position to come talk to us than they were right at the get-go. Once we kind of get to that stage where our victim is receiving those supports that our community is going to provide to them, then that's when we can start to build on the next stage, which is integrating police and taking statements. As a police officer, obviously what we look to do when we are investigating, obviously, is to take the best evidence and collect the best evidence that we possibly can. First of all, what we ask of our partners is that if you're ever in a situation where you obtain a disclosure from anybody, we ask that you please refrain from asking any more questions possible. And the reason for that is, hang on. Sorry, I get parched quickly. Reason for that is that it's going to reduce the trauma that our victim is going to face if they have to explain their story several times over. Recognize the fact that clearly they've been through a lot, but also we want to preserve as much of that information they're going to give to us, but we also want to save it for a police statement because that is our best evidence that we're going to get to start bringing these guys down. Obviously, if we can get somebody into an interview room or in any type of an interview, that's the opportunity that our investigators, we're going to be able to start really focusing the direction of that interview to try and obtain the best evidence possible. Sometimes statements are going to take a series of statements before we get to the point where we can start to build on that, corroborate statements. And we have to account for that. But again, it comes back to our victim, right? We can't push them all at one time. We can't sit down and do a 10-hour statement with them. We have to go in increments. We have to carefully assess our victims, see how they're doing, and continue on that relationship going forward. But the first thing is that we all have to be mindful not to judge the person who's coming in. It takes a lot of guts, it takes a lot of courage and bravery to be able to say, I've been trafficked, I need help. Reminder, this could happen to anybody. This could happen to anybody, as we've seen in presentations so far. Obviously, our kids, they come from good homes. They come from a variety of backgrounds. And obviously, we want to make sure that our victims, regardless of their age, regardless of their social standing, that they feel that they have that protection in place so that they can come and talk to us. Plus, judgmental can inhibit the trust building process. So just little signals. Here we go back to the victim-centered approach. So obviously do offer that support. It does help to encourage victims to start thinking about reporting this to police. All right, probably heard this now a few times today. Report to police. Can't stress that enough. Us as police, we can't do anything unless people start reporting what is going on in our community to us. Our police reporting systems have a built-in function that is a statistical function. And when we investigate files or complaints by the public, those are categorized on a statistical value, and they all go back to Criminal Center, Canadian Center for Justice Statistics, CCJS. Sorry, I'm thinking about that right. Actually, I might have also bastardized too, so I apologize. Anyways, we take statistics for all of our reporting. Those statistics are compiled at the end of every year, and they go off to Ottawa. Those statistics come back to the community. So this is why you're not seeing a lot of content in the province of BC, is because it's underreported. Doesn't mean it's happening. We all know very well in this room that it's happening, but it's not being reported to police. We're the ones that need to investigate this. We're the ones that's going to bring it to Crown for charge assessment, right? We're going to be the ones that's going to arrest bad guy. We're going to be the ones that's put these guys in jail. Our job is public safety, AKA we put assholes in jail. That's our job. So if you do get somebody, sorry, I deviate a lot and I apologize in advance. you do get somebody that's prepared and they're ready to talk to police, call up our front desk, call 911, whoever, just say, hey, I got someone here. I think they're being sexually trafficked. We're going to see it on a dispatch ticket. We're going to be like, oh, I'm interested in this. What is going on over here? As Kelly touched on, victim cooperation is the single most biggest hurdle facing law enforcement when investigating cases of human trafficking. Due to the psychological and physical control that these traffickers have over our victims, really plays a mental game with them, keeps them from reporting it. Fear, threats of harm, the list goes on and on. Anyways, we want to ensure people that there is safety precautions out there should they decide to report to police. And obviously we assess it on a case-by-case basis with everyone. Bottom line is that police can help. Everybody can help. As I mentioned before, detailed statements is the best evidence that we're going to get in order to lay a charge. This is why building trust with our victims is so important right from the get-go, right? We can get in there, we can start to meet these victims, they can meet us, see that we're human beings as well, and build on that opportunity to have those conversations with them. So, as I mentioned during my introduction, I run the plainclothes unit, which is also the general investigation section. So we're the lucky group of folks in the detachment that get to wear plainclothes to work. It is kind of cool, but it's very demanding work, everyone, just saying. For us that are not in uniform, we can work that to our advantage. It helps us build trust with people. Sometimes uniform can present a little bit of an intimidation, which can go against us being able to have those conversations, build trust with people. And here's the good part. Not everyone likes to come to the police station. I get it. We get it, which means we can come to you. You guys have a victim and they're ready to make disclosure to police. You let us know. We grab a kit that has a camera, audio recording devices, and we can come to a safe place to start that statement process with you. Whether it be in your counselor's office, whether it be in your principal's office, whether it be at your social worker's office, whatever the case may be. We're mobile. You can come and take a statement from your victim at a place that is comfortable for them, thus furthering the trust building process going forward. What does this all mean? It's about your victim. It's about our victim, right? So the way I see it is we have to ensure that we provide that client-centered approach. It's a victim-centered approach. Once we get our victim the basic necessities that they need, long-term, it'll look a little bit different for everybody, but ideal, and I think I've heard this already today, is that it will involve integration back into society where they're not dependent on people, they're not dependent on drugs, right? We want them to be independent, successful human beings. We don't want to see more people that we're hearing about having done themselves in because they felt there was no way out. When in fact there is a way out, and that's what part of the message is today, is to let people know that even though we are the police, we are still prepared to come to you, to work with you as best as we possibly can, to garner that evidence and start those prosecutions and get it in front of Crown as soon as possible, because there's not going to be just one. I expect we'll start to see a lot more of them. Here is again the number for the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline. Just a couple things that I wanted to share with you guys. I did a bit of digging. If you're ever interested in something called the Project Safekeeping, you can Google this. It is a massive document that was put together by a human trafficking section within the Government of Canada. And actually, I do encourage people to read it because it's quite full-encompassing. Lastly, on this, you'll see there's a book here. It's called Forever 21, and it's Madison's story. This is a book authored by a mother, Madison's mother. I had the privilege to be able to attend a conference at the beginning of December that was a human trafficking and the nexus to organized crime. And one of the first presenters that was at this function was Jennifer Holloman, and she talked to us a lot about primarily her story that involved her daughter. And her daughter, every red flag that we've discussed today, her daughter went through. Her daughter was trafficked, and so much of it was kept from her mother. And it wasn't until after her daughter died that a lot of these things came to the surface. They became known, and hence the mother took on her story. And she presents actually across the country, and her book is available on Amazon. Sorry, I don't have any copies free, but it is available on Amazon. But if you are interested in reading a little bit more about this, I certainly encourage you to do so. Because I remember obviously hearing Jennifer Holloman present at the conference, and it was actually truly quite touching because, you know, the amount of trauma and the treatment that her daughter received was truly disgusting. It was absolutely horrific. And how many times she was in hospitals for abortions, and how many times she was there because she'd been raped and then beaten and basically left for nothing by these horrendous people that are doing this. But that's essentially the end of my presentation. But if you guys have any questions, I will do what I can to get my contact out to you guys. If you do have anybody that is being trafficked, please let us know. Like I say, we want to start to encourage reporting. And that's about it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for being a rock star. I will give out a few books. So I believe you had a question, but you didn't get it answered. So maybe the answer's in there. Is it Jesse? You had a question too?
I don't get questions, but I get a
You get find a question. And I'm like, did anyone else come to all of you? You get story. Nobody has story. Is there anyone else that have an answer question? Okay. That's already know. Okay, you'll be really happy to know it's break time. So go eat, have fun, drink, eat lots of sugar. We'll be back at 11. No, the nice thing is it can be like people duty to report. I know people are weird about it. So, and that's what we're going to discuss is if you don't, how you and that's the conversations that it has in the community, especially as the Indigenous one. We really want to just to change service 82 especially the in-person home. I think is really, really good to be able to identify the services. So, especially with my, like, I was Valentine's and ICU. So everything. My thoughts are, I think, parents and family, it's not opportunities. Your relationship is community support. When you say it takes a village, it takes a village. It really does, and I think also if you don't know whether you should or not, then you should. Yeah, and how is it going to make you feel in the future if something happens? And you didn't just follow cautionary advice. You just chat to someone and they can say, well, that's not really a disclosure thing, or you know, and it's a conversation at the end of the day. And start, right? And it works on building. Like, works so much better than there's that worth I trust because we do get a lot of like this is anonymous with like counselors and stuff like that. But when you sit down and you have a conversation with that you and say, look, like
This there's option with this for safety, but for other not for other and then having those conversations. I mean, letting the child sit right or make it so giving them that power that teenagers they don't if they don't want to talk about anything they're not going to talk.
No, and then that's it's a done deal.
Yeah, and again, you've taken that power away from them, and we want to really get home that they have a voice.
I think you, well, I know you do that. Are you aware of youth being trafficked into children?
So it's the interagency. Federal laws, right? Those gaps that we want to find those. I'm not in Canada, I'm in Paris. Stacey's Kidderminster. So I think they have a little bit more of the understanding of it, but we're aware of kids being trafficked here.
I know the country.
But since that comes through our and the big one again is the information that gets us when it gets that ability out of us. Yes. For that some more information potentially opening up to the you can get that family or that use that support. So they're not by themselves.
And not feeling so isolated is a lot of.
Exactly. And if the parent knows, well, that's an issue. We deal with that. But if the parent doesn't know, then we still have ways to support that family. It's not in a child protection. It's a support service. It's people don't know what they don't know, and it's others. When I talk about this, and I have 2 teenagers, and they're like, "What?" So it's this information is not known.
No, it's not.
No,
It's really, it's not known. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. So use us.
I mean, I went to, there was a presentation put on by Illuminate who really fabulous resources and poor people. So,
Yeah.
so when we were putting this on, I'm like, are people gonna, because it's not something people really want to hear.
I'm sure. No, it's not, and it's not a comfortable topic. And either is MCSD and our board. Okay, all right, I'm out of here. Get out. Don't start talking.
Okay, everybody, that's all we want to get. So just grab the seat, make sure you have your wallet. I like to feed people well. We'll just wait for the last few people to settle down. This is a heavy topic. There's lots of information being thrown at you. This is not normally how I would do presentations. I would like them to be far more interactive, opportunities for people to discuss and be engaged at conversations at the table. Unfortunately, as a first time, we're kind of just downloading, I suppose, some top priority points. And so I'm going to hand you over to Nicole, who's going to take over the Northern Health.
So thanks, everybody. You may have noticed that I was a little short with my introduction. That was on purpose because I knew I was going to talk about it here. And I'm not on the agenda. Just to let you know, that's actually my fault. I created the agenda. Kind of funny, but typical. So give you some background. I have been with Northern Health for 15 years this year. I started with seniors and I've worked at every single facility in Terrace. And so my background's kind of like really varied from seniors to working at the hospital lab to then becoming a social worker, working with seniors, then working with community members, and now I work with youth. I really want to preface that by saying human trafficking is all ages. Even though we're specifically talking about youth today, you may, in listening today, recognize that some of these signs might be a parent that you've spoken to. It might be a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, a family member, or just a plain citizen. So recognizing that human trafficking actually in our community right now is affecting a lot of people and way more than what we were expecting. To give you a little background about myself, I've shared it with a few members in this room, but a lot of you I don't know. I grew up in foster care and I was trafficked when I was 14. I was trafficked for 2 years. And I was picked up out of a bingo hall when I was on a shared custody arrangement with my mom, where she got to have me for the day. And that day she took me to the bingo hall. It was a woman that accosted me. And that woman recognized that I was sad, lonely, and neglected. And she offered me things. She offered me comfort. She offered me love. She offered me respect of the person. And I desperately needed that because I hadn't heard that I'd been loved in a very long time. In my case, because I grew up in the Lower Mainland, I was trafficked in $1 million home by a gang with guns, with machetes. As a matter of fact, when you walked inside the door, there were men with machetes at the door. So recognizing that, when I took on this job and I started to talk to my clients, which my clients are all under the age of 19, I started to hear some things that reminded me of my childhood. And in that, I started to ask those questions. As I built rapport with these children and connection, and I valued their input, they started to share with me horrific stories of what was happening in the community. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, so recognize this is going to be quite jarring. But I have now been there when a child was pulled out of a dumpster when they were left for dead after an overdose, after being raped. I have been there in the ICU for a full week, the child on life support. I have attended dozens of court cases for children that are raped multiple times over and over. And recognizing too that one of those children, whom is now 17, that first rape from that first person was 14 years old, and we still have not gotten justice yet. So this is difficult work. But partnerships like we're doing here today is going to make all of the difference. So when this started for me with Julia, and Julia, I can't thank you enough. You're up here thanking people, but you listened to all the things that I had to say when I was really struggling to get the right people to hear me. And I reached out to our MLA, Ellis Ross, whom we all know now has changed, but that man made change for me. He connected me with MLA Ellen Sturko, who was former RCMP in government, who then helped me create connections in the RCMP when I wasn't able to get them on my own here. And I did not stop. I just kept screaming. And there actually was a point where my job was threatened and I was no longer allowed to attend work and talk to children because this topic was so dangerous in that moment. And I want you to recognize I was collecting names, I was collecting addresses, and I was collecting kids telling me their stories. Over the last 2 years, those relationships have allowed me to bring those children to the RCMP and empower them to tell their stories. I have children who have actually handed over their cell phones for 6 months and allowed RCMP to download everything. I have children telling me, I'm going to refer another child to you because I know that they're being trafficked and I want you to help them. So when you see, and I have a little bit of a list, but vapes, marijuana, clothing that you don't recognize and you ask them where they got it from, dab pens, alcohol, those are all things that are buying our kids and getting them into the sex trade and harming them. And when I say harming them, I'm not just talking about a sexual assault. I have children that have been beaten with bats. I have children that have been burned. I have children that are being raped by their own family members. So it's huge, it's all encompassing, but the only way it changes if all of us get together and we reach out to the RCMP and we say, we have children that need to be reported, and we create those relationships with those kids and we get them in that door. We need to empower children to tell their story. Because it's not about us. I will tell you, I've gone and told many a story without the child, and RCMP have been amazing and helped me through that. but it's really about empowering that child and getting them in the door for themselves. And it's huge because I have a child who has now been inside that door 15, 20 times for 15, 20 different things. That child was accosted by a man I want to say it was last week, but I realized it's Christmas. So just before Christmas, that child was accosted by a man online on social media who said, "Oh, I'll give you a vape." And then he drove it to her school. And principals are in here today, and that principal knows who they are. I really thank them for sounding the alarm. And then we were able to report that to the RCMP, that a man showed up at the school to provide a child a vape. And when he gave her the vape, he told her, "You owe me sex," immediately. Now, thankfully, I've worked with that child long enough for them to come immediate to me and say, "Oh shit, I'm in trouble again. I need your help to get out." So it's huge, but it's about relationships with these kids. So build those relationships, start to listen to what those warning signs are, and reach out to the appropriate people to get you help. I left my business card on the table for everybody. Anybody can call me at any time if you need help. I'll help direct you to the right location, or I'll support the youth that you reach out. So with that, I want to introduce to you Haley Reish, and she's out of Prince George, and she has the longest title ever, so I actually need to read it off of this report. Haley is our resource nurse for Youth Concurrent Disorder Team, Child and Youth Mental Health and Substance Use Regional Support Team. And holy Hannah, I can't imagine the knowledge she holds because that's a lot. But she's got a wonderful presentation for us today on substance use, which I think is really important because it's impacting a large majority of our clients. And I will tell you, 80% of my caseload is being sex trafficked, and obviously 100% of my caseload is children addicted to drugs and alcohol. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Haley, for your presentation today. I'll leave it off to you.
Thank you, Nicole. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so thank you, Nicole, for that introduction. Like we said, I'm calling in from Prince George, so the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh people. And I just definitely want to start off by acknowledging the rates of Indigenous clients that we see working in this area. And a lot of these resources that I'll go over today aren't Indigenous specific. So I just want to acknowledge that kind of disconnect there. And it's something that Northern Health is working towards on increasing the more specific resources for Indigenous youth here today. And so, like my title says, I'm a resource nurse. So my biggest priority is to just disperse knowledge about substance use and increase our Northern Health staff capacity to work with them in an effective manner. So yeah. I was trying to figure out how to thread in the connection of substance use and sexual exploitation, and it's been listed off many times today. So I won't reiterate that again and again, but that's just the biggest link. Youth are exposed to substances in exchange for sexual relations, and it's such an easy gateway into that lifestyle. So I'm just going to dive into some of the trends we see. We're going to go through all the resources that are available across Northern Health, BC, and specifically with Terrace. And then I just have a little bit of an interactive kind of discussion thing at the end that you guys can just do with your table if we have time. So I will go from there. So just a recap of what our opioid unregulated death stats are at. So we are seeing a bit of a trend down from 2022 to 2023. I'm sure there's a whole complex array of factors that contribute to that. But again, we see Terrace at such a high rate and Prince George. So out of all of BC, Terrace and Prince George are in the top 5 cities for highest death rates. So in Northern Health, our death rate is 71 deaths per 100,000. BC is 41 deaths per 100,000. So we're already quite far above the provincial average. And so Terrace had 23 deaths last year, which puts them at a rate of 150 per 100,000. So way above the provincial average. Terrace is a relatively small population. So definitely just want to validate how complex this issue is in Terrace. Highlighting again, it's linked to fentanyl and the rise of contaminated drug supply with benzos, making it complex. And just brief discussion about safe supply. Safe supply hydromorphone is about 3% of toxicology and death reports. So just putting it into perspective that it's still the illicit drug supply that's contaminated with quite strong opiates and the benzos that is the primary cause of death. So when we look at youth numbers, we are well aware that the number one cause of youth fatalities in BC is the unregulated drug supply. So between 2015 to 2022, there's 127 deaths attributed to unregulated drug supply. Second to that is suicide, and third to that is motor vehicle accidents. But within those two categories of suicide and motor vehicle accidents, I think it's like 60% of those coroner's reports had substances involved. So substances are pervasive, and each one of these deaths is preventable. When we look at the rate of deaths, again, we're seeing a trend down from the peak at 2022. So you can see 34 deaths in youth across BC in 2022. 2023 was 28 deaths, and 2024 was 16 deaths. So anecdotally, I was just going to review the whole link of sexual exploitation and substance use that I see in my work. We've already discussed that. So the next point is we're seeing an increase in complex withdrawal symptoms from youth using. So they're using the same substances that adults are. And we're seeing a rise in cases where they're coming into the hospital with like a seizure risk from the benzo with an opiate and having a seizure while in hospital or severe dehydration. And we're also seeing a younger age of opiate use disorder. And this makes it really complicated because a lot of our resources are for, usually it's for adults, like most of addictions research is in adults. So we're already entering this field with limited evidence-based guidelines. And then next to that, we see a bit of research 16 to 19 years old. But what we're seeing is still a 14, 15-year-old coming in with fentanyl use, having withdrawal, which is kind of unprecedented prior to this last couple of years here. So it's complex, it's prevalent, and youth are using just as similarly to adults in a way that maybe the general population might assume they're not. So when we don't treat opiate use disorder, as you can assume, there's a huge array of issues that come up with that. So obviously we have the risk of death, but then below that we have the risk of brain injury, we have the risk of bloodborne infection spread, any other like wear and tear on the body. So that comes with lots of use. And then kind of more psychosocial factors. We see dropping out of school, we see the high risk sexual practices, homelessness, the risk of gang involvement and criminal activity, deterioration in family relationships and friends, and an increased reliance on healthcare systems. And the whole, like calling the ambulance, getting the, overdosing over and over and over again, needing that CPR and resuscitation efforts. And then again, the sexual exploitation piece. So basically the question is, what is Northern Health doing about it? Obviously, we're limited by staffing, we're limited by like drug policy, and limited by like evidence-based practice when it comes to youth and funding. But what we have to date, we have a couple treatment center access. So there's the Nechako Youth Treatment Program in Prince George, where kids can come for residential treatment, as well as access to the provincial, it's called Yaya Youth and Young Adult Program down in Surrey and White Rock. There's the Foundry approach. So there's physical location in Terrace as well as Prince George. and then Virtual Foundry as well that offers groups. Most OAT prescribers include youth in their age category. Some sites don't, but the Terrace one for sure does. In Northern Health, we don't have any youth-specific harm reduction sites, and the OAT programs aren't youth-specific as well. So the population under 19 has to enter these adult spaces to receive any substance use care. So that's just kind of an overview about it. There's a few of our our guiding principles, like motivational interviewing, and making sure we're treating both the psychiatric conditions at the same time as the substance use conditions. Anyways, that's just kind of our approach. These are the guiding documents. Again, they're limited. So the BC Center of Substance Use produced a guideline in 2018. And so you can imagine how much has changed over the last, what is that, 7 years since that guideline came out. So some of these things are definitely challenging to work with and under. So the biggest piece when it comes to working with youth and substance use is to always be cognizant of where they're at in their change cycle. This is just simple concept that we use in addictions medicine, where basically the goal is to meet the kid where they're at. Do they want to change? Do they have no intention of changing? How can we shift that a little bit? What kind of education do they need? Do they want to change? What supports are in place for them? And so if you're not aware of what the kid's plan is, there's no point trying to get them into treatment if they don't have any intention of stopping use. So just being mindful of this assessment prior to introducing all the resources. So say they want to continue using, there's lots of resources online on how to have those conversations of how to safely use and how to reduce your risk while you're using. Obviously, we are guided by the Infants Act, so medical treatment, the interventions can be done under the Infants Act in the privacy and autonomy of the youth's life. So it's in Northern Health, it's our scope of practice to offer this education pieces without necessarily the parents needing consent or knowledge of this discussion, because it's not a medical treatment providing harm reduction resources. So just being aware that the youth has a right to the best evidence-based treatment. And at this time, it's a harm reduction model. So that includes sharing the ways of using safely, even though I'm sure we can all agree that some level of abstinence might be safest for the youth. Ultimately, we have to respect that. Interior Health has their whole own harm reduction team for youth, and they've come out with a lot of resources on tips on, not using alone, planning ahead, plan your ride ahead, get your drugs tested, all those things. So there's links to that in this PowerPoint. They are ready to change. Like we mentioned, we got the treatment programs. We have day treatment offered in both Terrace and Prince George at this time. We have certain sites across Northern Health have specific youth counselors. We just met Nicole, one of few in Terrace. And then Foundry, of course, is added to that. And again, this is just a list of what resources you guys have, but I'm sure I see some of you are in this very crowd, so obviously you guys are even more expert in this than I am. General websites for support, general apps. So again, we always want to look at the upstream approach of and family-centered approach. So how are we talking to parents and families about how they talk to their youth about substance use? So are they ignoring the problem? Are they comfortable talking about it? Are they using their childhood as kind of a guide to it? And at the end of the day, this landscape of the substances that youth are exposed to is so different than past decades. It's important for families to be up to date on what to share with them. So there's lots of family-based resources, guides on Foundry, There's Family Smart, which is more of a parent supporting parents approach, as well as the Holding Hope, so Moms Against the Harm programming that offers support groups for parents as well, for parents who have youth going through substance use concerns. A few documents on just basic tips how to talk to your teen about it. More options here. If any of you are interested in more module learning, here's some links here. This is more for healthcare providers, and I know we have a bit of a mixed crowd, so we'll send this out after. So that brings me to almost 11:30. So I'll try wrap up with this, but basically this is an exercise I run through with people, and it's called the TRIZ activity. We're basically going to work backwards, and then from there kind of come up with some solutions on how we want to do it. So sometimes I'm bad at explaining this, but basically an example of this is we want to build a boat together, but we want to ensure the boat sinks. What are our steps to do that? So you guys might tell me, let's build it out of a heavy material so it sinks. Let's build it with full of holes. All the anyways, example. So then we're going to work backwards and say, okay, what can we do to prevent that? So the question is, what leads to more substance use in youth, or what leads to higher risk use? And we can add in the context of sexual exploitation with this. What are some things that are guaranteed to lead a youth to substance use? So I'll just give you guys maybe like a minute just to either write down something or chit chat with the neighbor beside you. And then I'll just bring us back.
And not having some guarantees.
I think that's kind of what I said, like, we're gonna talk about this first and then the opposite. That was just.
The lack
Right.
of skills.
Yeah.
To deal with the same.
Lack of, like,
Yeah, it's so easy to.
yeah. Reflective about this one thing that I have. Yeah. Yeah. Draw. Like whatever problem figure.
Yeah, that's such a long way. It's like my bars. Yeah.
Okay, how does that sound? Is that good enough time? Are you guys time? Okay. Not to cut people off, but I'm sure everybody could come up with a million billion reasons as to why youth would use more. Some of the things I imagine you guys have written down is not having clean access to drug supplies, using alone, peer pressure, no support from counselors, Maybe the just abstinence-based learning where they just tell you don't use, and that's as much information as they get. Maybe they've tried talking to a healthcare worker or a teacher or a professional before, and they were really stigmatizing about it. And maybe there's some bigger issues going on. So we have the contaminated drug supply, we have drug policy in BC, and yeah, I can imagine you guys came up with a lot of similar kind of points as that. So this is more just like a reflection one. I'll just give us like a minute to kind of reflect on this. And just basically the point is to think about, do we do any of this in our life? So if you're a parent sitting in the crowd, if you're a teacher sitting in the crowd, if you're police or hospital staff, like you might not relate to many of those things, but maybe there are some things you feel that are contributing yourself. So I'll just give it like, I don't know, 20 seconds to think about this. So basically the next part of the activity would be to kind of look at, are there any of those that we can actively change in our community today, or in your own home or in your classroom? This is obviously could be a really big discussion too, and we're probably a little bit short on time, so I'll just keep moving through this. And so basically I just want to end with this concept. Basically it's looking at what is our job, what is in our control. So this breaks it down into 3 circles of control. So we have the big outer one, which is our circle of concern. Second one is circle of influence. Third one is circle of control. So, and I love that we have so many different practitioners here in the crowd today. So things that you might list as circle of concern could be like just overall like intergenerational trauma, Canada's history, drug policy in BC today. And basically the question is like, what can we do about that? We can't always do too much about that. So making sure that burden of worrying about that isn't super overwhelming. The next part is circle of influence. So what are things that we don't have control over, but things that we can influence? So maybe like you have teens of your own and you're going to create the message about substance use with your teens in the hope that they can kind of have impact on their peer group. Maybe you're a social worker and you have a youth that's really struggling with substance use, and you have your boundaries of how you can impact them, but maybe part of it is just setting up referrals for them, sharing resources. If those things are limited, getting in touch with the child and youth advocate. And then we want to look at like what is actually in our control. So when we are face to face with a youth who is using, when we're face to face with a youth who is using in relation to sexual exploitation, how can we control our thoughts and emotions around that situation? Are we able to create a safe space for this youth to talk about it? Do we know the most up-to-date knowledge about substance use? Are we able to give those tools to the youth? Are we using stigmatizing and discriminatory language around it? Just figuring out kind of what can we control, what can we not control, what energy do we have to spend on each of these circles, and yeah, just being aware of all of that. That is the end of my PowerPoint. I can definitely send this out as a PDF to folks, and I will hand it back over to you, Nicole, unless anybody has any questions or any discussion pieces.
Thank you so much, Haley. So thank you, everybody. If we have any questions, like Julia said, we'll keep that for later on, and we'll try and get some answers back out to you as soon as we can. And just gonna double check here, but I'm pretty sure it's MCFD up next, and they're going to do the duty to report presentation for us. So thank you very much to the representatives from the Ministry of Children and Family. Take minutes. Senator.
Even better.
I actually don't know your colleagues, so you're gonna have to.
Right, good morning, everybody. My name is Meg McAlpine. I am a child and youth family service worker. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. I usually have a loud voice, but, so I am a child and youth family service worker with Ministry of Children and Family Development. So I work with families, teenagers, youth, in a more supportive, voluntary role. And this is
My name is Stacy. I'm one of the fully delegated workers. I actually work in the Kinbat office. I asked for somebody to come. I was asked to come. We have a pretty long presentation because we know we don't have a lot of time. We're kind of going to skip through a lot of stuff that you probably have maybe heard if you've been given the presentation in your own agencies. So we'll try to make it a little speedy, but also not so speedy that it doesn't have an impact.
First, we'd like to thank you to the Kids Last people who have worked today on this beautiful land, and want to apologize about our technical issues. We had a presentation, but our Wi-Fi security system on our computer does not want me to connect to it. So we'll start. Sorry for the verbal. We can send some information out. We do have a duty to report pamphlet on your desk if you want to take a peek through it.
To explain the legislation that MCFD operates under specifically relates to the inaction or actions of a parent. So in a lot of the conversations that we talked about today, the assumption would be that the parent is not involved and is not participating or allowing or wanting the child to do it. But it is possible that the parent is actually creating the child to do it. In those cases, for sure, it would involve MCFD. But even if the parent is not actually encouraging the child to do it, MCFD can be involved with a supportive role for the family, for the people that are the parents or acting as a parent, or the youth. We can help connect with like counseling referrals, help navigate sometimes with RCMP. Sometimes youth are more comfortable speaking to me or a worker than they are to the RCMP initially, and we can try to encourage them to trust into the RCMP. If we receive a report, we can at least navigate like who the information has to go to first. We understand it's a criminal matter, so we always will defer to our CMP and say, hey, like, can we speak to them first? No, you're gonna speak to them. Often the RCMP will allow us to watch their interview so that we're only having to ask the question one time. So like it's kind of like a collaborative approach. That seems to work really well. And our legislation is obviously BC connected.
We work under the CFCSA, Community Child and Family Services Act. We also work hand in hand with the Indigenous community. So NIFGIS, Northwest Nations, they work on or off the reserve, and Nishka Child and Family Services.
So basically a duty to report is the person who has a reason to believe that a child or youth may be abused or neglected is the person that needs to make the report. And I cannot stress this enough. What we get quite commonly is we get information from someone in the agency saying they were told by somebody something is happening to this person. By the time we have the information beforehand, but I can say that comes honestly from the school board, Northern Health, occasionally our CMP, and it's really hard for us to take that information and assess it properly when we don't even have the first-hand account of what's going on. It's also difficult because we have to ask questions, and the person that's getting the report, we can't ask questions because they don't have the information. They're told by third, fourth, fifth hand information. So the person that has the disclosure, that has a reason to believe, really needs to make that report, and they need to make the report as pretty soon as they can, especially when we're talking sexual abuse, exploitation, physical harm, because these are things that need to be assessed pretty quickly because we don't know how safe the child is in the home or where they are. Right. So I know I'm making that very clear, but is one of the most important parts of the presentation, is please just make the report yourself. I want to share just a brief example. Sometimes what happens is we get a report that might be for something totally not related, and then we find out through the assessment that there has been sexual abuse or exploitation. So I can share with you, I attended to a totally unrelated call and found out that this guy had been living in community for 4 years under an assumed name, and he had proceeded to have children under his assumed name with his partner, and he was a horrific person who has spent time in jail having sex with little children, and no one knew. And we got involved in totally different circumstances. So like, just make the report, because you never know, and if there's information in there, how we're gonna find out. And we collaborated with our CMP, and we were able to protect those young kids in the home. And for the records, the mom didn't even know. The mom didn't even know that was going on. So it's really important. Hi,
can I ask a question?
yeah,
Just because I had a conversation with Julia a while ago about reporting to MCFT, then is the onus of the reporter to also call the RCMP if it's a criminal matter.
we will call our CMP ourselves. So I mean, we don't discourage people from also making the report. We would much rather the same thing be done multiple times. So I definitely don't discourage doing, but we have a responsibility to also report. So I usually just say both. So same thing is quite common, like a report might be made to us and then we'll our CMP report to us too. But it'll all get tied together, more information the better, and it kind of just gets the ball moving faster. Because sometimes disclosures might not be made at the same time, so we might get it quicker from, our CMP than we have from the school or from Northern Health or from a community member. So like, just do it. I'd rather come to work Monday morning and have 3 reports than 0.
And also,
Go ahead.
so if a person in community receives a report like third hand, they should still be reporting to yourselves and SARS.
They report it, but please tell the person, like, make the report as well. Because it's something simple as too, is like, sometimes we get reports are anonymous and like, there's something wrong in it. I can't track down people because like, I don't have a phone number. Sometimes I don't even have a name, right? And then I can't call the caller back to say, can you give me some more information? Because they've made it anonymous, right? Like, and sometimes it's even with family members. They report on a family member, but haven't talked to the aunt for 5 years. Like, tell me your name. I'm not going to disclose who the caller is, but at least then I can try to get the information that's missing. So just do it, but encourage the first person to. And within your own agencies, make sure that you support your staff to make that report. Because we'll hear, I didn't have time because I'm busy and like the day got away. Well, if you can, in your agency, help your staff make that report. But in the end, as an adult in BC, you have a duty to make that report anyways.
Casey.
Hi.
One of the things we run into is that somebody will hear something from a student, say, or from somebody at the park, and then it gets passed on to somebody else,
Yeah.
passed on to somebody else. And then the person that gets passed on to the third person is the one who maybe works for Northern Health or something. And they know that they have to call.
Yeah.
But the 2 other people before that, they don't want to make the call.
I know.
But so the obligation is that the person who hears about it
Yeah.
should be supporting the victim, but also making that call, because fourth-hand information is stuff, but the obligation is the first person who acquired the knowledge.
Yeah, ideally it's going to be the first person, but often sometimes it's going to be the fourth and then maybe the first person, right? But that's why we want to try to do these presentations more, is to encourage those systems, to encourage their employees to make the reports.
So under the CFCSA, section 13 is mental health needs protection. So I'm going to read off most of these, but we're really kind of, like Stacey said, we're geared towards sexual abuse and exploitation in this matter. So we'll be focusing more on that, but for a child that needs protection, so you can report any of these. So under the following circumstances, a child has been or is likely to be physically harmed by parents. The child has been or is likely to be sexually abused or exploited by the parents. The child has been or is likely physically harmed, sexually abused, or sexually exploited by another person. And if the child's parent is unwilling or unable to protect that child. If there has been harm or likely to be physically harmed because of neglect, and the child is emotionally harmed by the parent's conduct, or living in a situation where domestic violence is being perpetrated in the house. So as Stacy said, like, we have the ability as MCFD, by we, I mean the delegated social workers, to go into homes to interview kids, and interview families. And that is where some more information can be disclosed, can be told to the social worker, which may open up other doors and get some more information if the child is being exploited. And then what we do is we work collaboratively with our CMP and to kind of move forward with that.
Yeah, I mean, the next day too, we covered the entire morning, like sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, we've covered really the explanations of it, but like I shared for MCFD to act protectively of the child, it's when the parents are either know what's happening, making it happen, and don't respond appropriately. So a common example that we see is when a sexual offender is back in the home and one of the parents is allowing the offender to live in the home and knows that they're doing it, right? Knows that they're doing it and allowing them to live. That's a common example of something that we would see. But if the parent didn't know, then really what we want to know from when the report is made is what did that parent do? If you told them that it was happening and the parent asked the person to leave or left the home with the children, that parent has acted appropriately to protect that child because they didn't know. So, but really, that's kind of up to us to assess that information, and we can either act more intrusively or we can try to support the parent, next supports for the child.
Yeah. So again, this has been talked about today. I'm responding to a youth who disclosed this, right? I can't stress enough. I worked hand in hand with Nicole, and I'm very appreciative of that, and she's taught me a lot. And it's the relationship piece that is so important for the kids. To have people in their corner and an understanding that they're not alone. So what we suggest is, stay calm, give the kid a private space and let them talk. It is the job of MCFD and RCMP to do the interviewing, and understanding that there are going to be potentially more than one agency talking to this child, right? So with trauma informed, it is limiting the amount that the child has to retell their story.
Yeah, I think you make a report like the basics of what you really need to know. So honestly, it's as simple as like who lives in the house. We need to know how many kids live in the house. We need to know where the address is, because depending on the address, MCFD responds, or a delegated agency. If it's happening like in an Indigenous region, we don't necessarily act in that respect. But you can call a centralized screening number and they can always screen it to the right office when that happens, which I've put the pamphlets on the table. But like the details, we're not going to be digging for information, but what you just need to share for us to assess it. And one thing that can be helpful if you are involved with the family is supports that are available to help. Or you yourself are a caller, let's say you're a family member or you're somehow connected. You can sometimes we'll get people say, like, I want to help this family, you need support, let me know. Because sometimes it's just good that we can say, hey, like, what about so-and-so? When we're interacting in small communities, it's very helpful that we can reach out, build on those relationships and make things less scary for these families. So anything really helpful can be very good. But simple as honestly, sometimes it's like, I need to see how many kids live in. What are their ages? Are there other adults that live in? The kids that live in? Are there any guns? Would be really nice to do actually. Like, I like to know when I'm walking into a small ass, like, if there's any guns, drugs, they're gonna be really mad at me. If they're gonna be really mad at me, maybe should I not go? And I'll be like, no, it'll probably be nice. Right? Okay. You think I should bring police? No, they'll probably be fine. Like, just share it. If you have a reason to believe that I'm gonna be at risk, like, please tell when you make the report so that I don't show up and put myself in a position I don't want to be in. But hopefully we sped through it, so if there's any more questions, that we can kind of answer them. Yeah.
So when we call, we call the centralized screening office, did you know that a kid already has a file? You still have to call the main.
You can do either or. So
Okay.
Monday to Friday, you can call the Terrace Cabinet office 8:30 to 4:30. Ideally, if someone available to take a report, occasionally they might not have anyone and they'll give you the 1-800 number. Otherwise, you can always call the 1-800 number 24/7, 7 days a week, depending on the report and the assessment. We might respond immediately, 24 hours, or within 5 days, or not at all. There's something like, I think, 7 or 10,000 calls a month. And obviously, we're not responding 7 to 10,000 times a month, right? Just because someone has a file doesn't necessarily mean that we have all the information. So like, we often get a file, we keep attaching new information, so we just build a bigger file. Don't assume that we haven't done anything. That's another thing, is we don't really tell the callers what we've done, so people won't report because they say, well, you're not doing anything, why should I bother? But you don't know that we're not doing something. The parents aren't showing up and like telling you that Stacy was at my door yesterday and, made this. They're not telling you these things. Like, if they're not going to tell you what they have done, honestly, if I'm doing my job good enough, the kids might not tell you either. Because honestly, the kids kind of just see me as this cool person. They don't go around saying what Stacy did. If I've done my job good enough, if I'm not making those kids scared, I'm not making the parents scared either. So I find they don't really say what I. So just like make the report and let us do the job of assessing it and trying to support these families, because that is my goal and anyone's goal who works for MCFD is to support the families and try to be the least intrusive as possible.
And sliding on that least intrusive piece is they open up what is called voluntary support services. So that's where my role is. So child and youth family, I'm not a social worker. I go in and if there are no child protection concerns, I work directly with the family. And when it comes to the exploitation, I try and hook the family up to community agencies and build rapport, build those relationships. So the circle is around that child or that family, because sometimes families don't know what's out there. Like sometimes I don't know what's out there, and it's information and environments like this where we get to learn that and to pass it on in the hopes of giving our families more support for what we have in this very small little community. And my services are voluntary. If a parent doesn't want to be involved, they don't have to be. It's not forced, but it's usually pretty well received.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in there, just Stacy talking about like the amount of reports and stuff. I asked for my record from MCFD 2 years ago, and I came on my birthday, which is not the best day to get it. But there was 600 pages with 1,000 pages redacted. And I lived in 50 foster homes over 2 provinces. So really recognizing like some of the stuff that these kids are going through is all of the stuff that these guys are having to deal with. And I went through a ton as a child. It's amazing I'm here when I think about some of the experiences I had. But it's people like Stacy, it's people like Megan, it's people like us in this room that changed my life. So really, I know we kind of give MCFD a hard time. I've heard it my whole life. I've probably said it myself. But recognizing that change happens in this room. Those 600 pages that I read about myself was rough. I can only imagine what was in the 1,000 redacted.
When I was just your file.
And that's just my
So, like,
file.
there was parent files that are probably 5 or 6 times.
And that when I got out of the human trafficking, that's a whole different file because I reported that. That's how it got stopped, was I reported it. So recognizing, right, like all of that, that's work that they have to do. So we need to come together as a community and partner. Like when Megan was saying we work together, we work tight together. Like I am in her office as much as I'm in my own. And so it makes a huge difference to have that wraparound support. The nurses, I work with Promoti, I work with Kassan. Like it's important to me that I work with the RCMP, come together as a team, child and youth mental health, but we need to talk more. I think we've done less talking and we need to do more talking.
Yeah, I agree. There's also a committee in Paris and Kennebunk called Situation Table, that there's, people from the different agencies that sit on it, that we can bring a family to the table and talk about how to support them. It's not utilized enough in Kennebunk. Like, when we do utilize it, it's really a great thing. Everyone comes to the table, decides what needs to be done, it's on like that day, next day. So there, I know they have it in Paris as well, so, I mean, if you connect to the right agencies, they will have somebody that can bring a family to that table and try to support them.
I am cognizant of time and I am cognizant that there was a question. So if anybody who wants to stay after, we'll be kicking around. I'll be kicking around. We'll be going. I volunteered her. Happy to answer any questions. Okay. I know this wasn't a long time, but we're available for a phone call whenever.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. I'm a stickler for time because you're all watching it. And I'm not going to keep you any longer than necessary. I'm like, oh, Carly, you should have the green book. I feel like this table, someone needs it. Not sure which person would like to take that. Okay, is there a separate team? You. Okay.
Well, you're on.
I'll think about it.